I'm going to ask Spatch with Group 8 to start us off here.
Hi, everyone. So this is Group 8. We had some great discussion. I had the least time to prepare of all of the facilitators to talk to you, so bear with me. But in terms of the greatest assets and strength in Teaneck, the big themes that everyone discussed was that this is a community-based town. It has, people have great ties to one another. It's very community-based. There's a great diversity in people, in housing characteristics, and in cultures in town. People love that. It's close to New York City and its industries, but it has a suburban feel. They talked about institutions like the Rhoda Center being an asset, and Fairleigh Dickinson University also as an asset, though potentially underutilized. They also talked about churches, parks, the farmers market, and all these different things in Teaneck, helping to create community ties and keep people involved with one another. Yeah, all right. The next topic was what needs improvement or change, and what might be the biggest challenges in the next 5 to 10 years. I think one of the things that folks talked about was making sure that Teaneck is not a pass-through town between Hackensack and Englewood, helping people come and stay, bringing vibrancy back to the downtowns. There were concerns related to traffic and congestion, not just in personal vehicles, but also on the buses. I think we talked about ensuring that younger folks and families can stay here. That goes back to the vibrancy piece of things. We also talked about incorporating Fairleigh Dickinson University more into the community, potentially making this more of a, not necessarily college town, but a bit more vibrancy from it. Yeah, a bit more like Rutgers cities. People talked about it getting too crowded in town and wanting to retain a low intensity environment. And we did talk a bit about some social policy that may be better addressed in a different forum, but food insecurity and things like that are important issues that we talked about too. Did I? Mostly. Okay, all right. In terms of one key topic that the master plan must address, in terms of values in the process of creating a master plan, we really talked about communication and transparency as being very important to this process overall. So while that, might not create policy change that we'll recommend in the master plan and affect zoning, certainly it's a part of this process that everybody discussed wanting and being heard and listened to. And we talked about that including connecting to people who are not savvy with technology and things like that. In terms of the key topics that a master plan can address in terms of the physical environment, folks talked about quality of life. That was the big thing. And that encompassed overcrowding and congestion, high rises, the downtown areas, and just intensification of parks in different areas, but really all of those aspects and how they affect quality of life. A Holy Name Medical Center we talked about too, and how to make sure that it is a good healthcare facility, but connects better with the community once again. Right? Okay. And then the last question, who must be included in the master planning process? We talked about younger families who they felt were underrepresented here tonight, and using the schools and PTOs and sports leagues to connect with those people. Also, Fairleigh Dickinson University, both students and representatives from the university, I think. Religious groups, And again, we talked about reaching folks that are not tech savvy, potentially through posters at supermarkets, and also just relying on community ties to make sure that people who maybe don't have a cell phone or email can stay informed of what's happening. So yes, okay, all right, that's our group.
All right, thank
All
you.
right.
All right, let's go to 7, group 7.
Thank you. Hello, yeah, thank you. So we had a lot of common themes in our group. So for what are Teaneck's greatest assets and strengths? First, people, the diversity, that it's a progressive, artistic community. There was a lot of talk about the parks and open spaces, trees. Someone noted that when you drive through Teaneck on Route 4, there's not a lot of commercial businesses, that it's just green and it's really beautiful. Rich history and many historic sites, small private homes with a suburban feel, cultural institutions, including a lot of nature preserves, the educational system, proportion of single family homes here versus multifamily. That was primarily the strength that we noted. As far as aspects of life that need improvement, was noted public transportation, both within Teaneck and to other communities and for commuters. Communication to community residents about events and meetings such as this meeting this evening, making sure that that all residents are communicated to. Revitalization of business districts, pedestrian and bike-friendly streets, and maintaining sidewalks better. Areas where development is planned, one noted that communities around locations or sites where development is planned are sometimes left to deteriorate, or homeowners are, code enforcement are not enforced, building codes are not always enforced. And so homeowners who live in these areas see homes around them not being kept up. Maintaining the character of the community and ensuring that development is smart, that buildings are not too large, too high, too much density. Concerns around increased traffic as new developments are completed. Again, transparency around development and making sure that there's community input into any major decisions that will impact the community. And finally, that parks are more user-friendly with more benches, lighting, shady areas, et cetera, for people of all ages. The one key topic that everyone sort of narrowed in on that the master plan must address is housing and development. And under that, making sure that there's opportunities for community input, that there's transparency around development, that new development is aligned with the town's character, that AINRs are not misused, and that development includes a variety of sizes, price ranges, and that there's affordability. Who must be included in the master planning process? Educational institutions, including the Board of Education, families with school-age children. We know that this group will be included, but making sure that emergency services are, such as the fire department and so on, are keeping up with and having input into plans and capacity around their capacity. Renters, and someone noted that there used to be rent control guidelines in Teaneck, and maybe having renters have input into rents. Young adults, houses of worship, and neighborhood block associations. And that's it.
Thank you, group 7. All right, we'll go to group 6.
Are you sick?
Hey, group 6. Good evening. Question 1, what are Teaneck's greatest assets and strengths? Without question, diversity was the #1 response our group had. Also, OT Park, the Hackensack River, the fact that Teaneck is a very progressive community, the great schools that we have, the sense of community, something for everyone. Incredible amount of active residents who care about the community, and being able to find a niche due to diversity in the township. Second question, what aspects of life in Teaneck need improvement? Housing affordability, traffic safety, walkability, bikeability. The central business district, specifically Cedar Lane, needs to be revitalized, improvement. Other issues we discussed were flooding in town, specifically in the Bell Avenue area. One of the other responses was the housing needs to be more diverse, multifamily housing needed. Several of our responses were residents that wanted to be less reliant on their motor vehicle, having the ability to walk the town, where the town is safe to walk in. Traffic safety was without question a big concern of our group. Additional ratables are needed. Also democratizing government, encouraging residents to participate in the development. The public needs to be more involved in the development process. Vacancy decontrol was another issue that was brought up. Having rent control so that the rents are not increasing, double-digit increases. Eminent domain was another issue that we discussed, making sure that was not implemented, so one of our residents would not have his house taken from him. And lastly, being heard and listened to and having community input. What is one topic the master plan must address? The Cedar Lane Business District. Again, the improvements and revitalization that are needed in the central business district there. Having consensus on development. One of the recommendations was having a design ordinance like Englewood with design standards. It would be what the town wants to develop, not so much the developer wants to develop. Vehicular traffic concerns over the increased traffic due to development. And actually revitalization of the 4 central business or the 4 business districts. And the last question, who must be included in the master planning process? Renters. One of our participants felt that because they're renters, their opinions are not valued as much as homeowners. They don't feel their opinion is valued. One of the recommendations from our group was to have more outreach to the renters, be it hand delivery of letters or by mailers, similar to what was done with the reassessment of the homes. Seniors, they need more representation. Reaching out to prospective buyers, people that may want to come live in Teaneck. One of our participants felt that the northeast section of the township was not well represented. And also store owners. The amount of store owners that are present here tonight, I don't know how many there are, but it was felt that there needs to be more store owner participation in the process. That is it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, group 6. All right, where is group 5?
Of course, Teaneck's greatest asset of Group 5 is that it's a diverse, thank you, that it's a diverse community. People stay here. It's not a transient community. Group 5 feels that there is good support for seniors and that the senior center is terrific, the Rhoda Center. This group loves the bucolic, non-urban feel of Teaneck, the trees. It's a quiet residential community with a good school system, especially if your child applies himself and you are involved as a parent. There's a feeling that there's good transportation to the city, lots of cultural assets, mosques, synagogues. The fact that the Muslim community has grown and become more active is something that we considered a real asset to the community. The Teaneck International Film Festival, library, Friends of the Library are among the cultural assets that really make Teaneck special. As far as aspects of life in Teaneck that need improvement, there are too many multifamily dwellings and people, according to this group. And I'll be brutally honest, this group feels that developers have had too much control and traffic must be better managed. People who moved here didn't choose to live in an urban environment. And they hope that development will be more thoughtful and ANIR. I won't use the term that was used, but it's not a nice term, but that's how some people feel that it hasn't been used properly. We need more supermarkets. We're concerned about Cedar Lane, all the business districts, but particularly Cedar Lane. Double parking is allowed and it's very difficult for people to park. And we need more stores that would attract shoppers on the, like a clothing store, a shoe store. On the other hand, the challenge is that people are buying online. And so we understand that for retail, that's a big problem. But those of us who want to shop, want to have stores in our community, we need more restaurants. We all miss diners. And there was a strong feeling that we don't want 350 more apartments in the Stop and Shop area. We need more housing for people with disabilities. And that's a group that isn't thought of often enough. There's a recognition that we need to compromise, that we don't want a gigantic building effort, but there has to be some place, the missing middle, for seniors or younger people who want to move to town and can't afford to buy a single family home. There should be a place for them in Teaneck. So we may not be able to keep our low density and have these people here or places for seniors to go. I moved to another town when there was no place to go. How many multifamily dwellings are enough? The master plan should provide some kind of a cap. One key topic that the master plan must address is how to contain overdevelopment. And there are concerns about the township having adequate infrastructure and resources to support the development that's here and maybe coming. Among the groups that must be included in the master planning process, people with disabilities, people of all ethnicities. We didn't feel that there was a great representation of a cross-section of the town here. Renters, the Northeast Block Association, and all block associations, millennials, certainly the business community. And there's a real concern about communication and outreach that's got to be improved around in general in the township, but around this process. There were people who only learned word of mouth from somebody else. They didn't see anything. They didn't read anything. There was nothing in the newspaper about this meeting. And that's a concern that it not continue that way, that we have to do much more outreach.
Is that it? Okay, thank you.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Excellent. Thank you, group 5. Group 4. All right, thank you, Hilly.
Yay, and Jackie, right, I just said, and Jackie's paying, okay. Group 4 was awesome. What are Teaneck's great assets and strengths? A lot of repeats from what we've heard, but people really cherish the green space in our town, that the town is walkable, that there's an abundance of sidewalks, although there are some areas without them, that in general, there are sidewalks to walk on. The diversity of the town, as you heard, I heard the words racial, ethnic, religious diversity, economic diversity, tolerance, and activism. People really care about this community and they see that as an asset. Transportation to New York City, that we're in close proximity, and that we have many different houses of worship, which brings people to town and which we're all very proud of. And that our neighborhoods are generally connected and centers of many cultures. So a lot of what we've heard before. Also that they feel that our recreation and park system is very robust. We have multi-use parks, and they really enjoy using them and appreciate them. So those were assets. Aspects of life that need improvement. What do you see? What do you want to see change? And what might be biggest challenges in the next 5 years? More robust main streets. Predominantly, we talked about Cedar Lane, although we did talk a little bit about Teaneck Road and other places. That there should be perhaps free shuttle service in our town to railroad stations for people to commute to New York, that the bus commute is getting worse. And with more people coming into town, it may get worse. And some people wanted to make it easier to get to those train stations that are very close by to our town. Or plan an open train stop in Teaneck, but the preferred option was to make it easy for people to get to those train stations from our town. A pedestrian cycling plan, that we should have a plan for bike lanes, which would also be important for people of all ages that are biking today. And better transportation within the town from point A to point B so that you don't necessarily have to get in your car. And because there are problems with parking. And that for development that you need a solid parking plan that's aligned with any improvements. They did talk about, the same thing came up about it being difficult for businesses today, that people realize that it's hard to stay open because people are shopping online. So to encourage different types of businesses, places where people can gather, restaurants, think creatively about bringing different types of businesses into town that would be utilized. Some of our parks, although parks were cherished, they said some of our parks, they particularly pointed out Oregon Park, it seems to be neglected. They're not utilized well. They could be. We need pickleball courts. That was, and that our tennis courts could be multi-use for pickleball and tennis. And right now there's just one that has that ability. Also, there was people that felt that we do need more housing, different types of housing, perhaps relax the 2-family home restrictions so that multi-generational families have places to live together. And that would help to relieve some of the concerns about affordable housing for older folks and for some of our people that are growing up but not ready to buy their own places. Let's see, new guidelines for structure so that we talked a lot in the beginning of the beauty of the town, the architecture of our town, the Tudor houses, the brick houses. A lot of people remark how beautiful Teaneck is, but the new structures don't have that beauty and they would like them to mimic the charm of the town. And I think I captured all of that. Okay. One key topic that the master plan must address, housing for the next generation, the types of housing, the architectural design, and it should be affordable with suitable parking. Aligned with that, housing for the next generation, we need to improve our infrastructure for the next 5 to 10 years. A lot of the residents in our group felt that we're not prepared for what's to come. And management of parking in the town, there was a complaint that the merchants and the business districts park in front of their stores all day, and then people can't park where there's easily accessible, walkable to get into those stores. What must be included in the master planning process? This is one thing that did not come up in the other groups yet, and I think it's a really interesting idea, is through our real estate agents, talk to people who are interested in moving here and ask them why they're interested in the town and where the gaps are. Why might they not move here as opposed to other places that they're looking. and also talk to houses of worship and why people chose this town. We have such a diverse religious community that's attracted to the town. So they should be included in our process. Multi-language speakers, I think others talked about this, that we should reach out to people of other cultures that are living in our town. We saw how the demographics are changing. We should do direct outreach to them. And our group talked a lot about it is hard to get people to come to meetings like this, so we should go to them. And that we should go, I know that we have gone to senior centers for other reasons in Teaneck to tell them about services or offer voter information. There's no reason why we can't go to either houses of worship, go to schools and talk to young people about what they're proud about of their town, what they would like to see change, and also go to gathering places where people might be going for other reasons, PTA meetings, things like that. Well, some people can't come to, a lot of people with young children can't come to meetings like this because they have young families. Renters, that came up before, so I won't repeat why. We all know why. Let's see. I said PTAs, elementary schools. I think that's it.
All right, thank you, group 3 or group 4. Now we're on to group 3.
That's group 3.
We had a great group. One thing we had in our group, which I think almost every group had, we had about a quarter millennium of Teaneck residency here. Hundreds of years of Teaneck. I'm going to try to skip some of what was discussed that everyone's already mentioned and try to stick with some newer ideas or some that stood out. Okay, as to what are Teaneck's greatest assets and strengths, many of which we just heard tonight: accessibility, education, location. A paid fire department was a new one. We had residents who volunteer, the highway, the cohesiveness, the location, the Teaneck Film Festival, the library, Bischoff's, Camp Coos was one that was mentioned as well. The programming, free parking was mentioned, and the farmers market. Those are just some that were mentioned that were not mentioned before. We mentioned a lot of other ones that everyone has said in their groups as well. What aspects of life in Teaneck need improvement? What would you like to see change? Comments of being a city, pedestrian friendly, tear down and rebuild the business district, the DPW, an incubator program to help businesses and loans. Some districts like DeGraw that needs more love, a tree plan, covering tree and sidewalk damage, the high rises, the preservation zoning, improve transportation, and determine a location for cannabis. Also, one that was not discussed tonight that I didn't hear yet discussed was the train issues. What is one key topic that the master plan must address? One was the preservation and the residential feeling, creating a hub, improving votee, and maintaining what we have. Who must be included in the master plan? Because I think the last group to go, a few that we heard that may not have been spoken that we did not hear. Young families due to the time that we're having this at night. Children themselves was something that maybe to hear from the actual children. Doing this or doing one of these in a school. The Muslim community was underrepresented tonight, as were we felt the Hispanic community and maybe Hispanic community included in this, the newer residents of town. As mentioned, I'm here for almost 30 years and I was one of the younger people with my servings here. And I mean, not age, meaning how long I've lived here. So we really are missing anyone that's, and if I could just interrupt, how many people have been living here under 5 years? I think that's the point. So handicap. Again, hear from the handicap, hear from the full town staff, not just the senior town staff, but the people on the streets who are picking up our garbage and the recycling DPW guys. Notification of future meetings to keep on pushing and pushing on that. Suggestion was a robocall. We know there's pros and cons to that, but that was a suggestion. A bigger space. FDU, involve FDU in this. And I think that's what we have. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, group 3. All right, we have 2 groups remaining. If we're up to group 2. Group 2, Hillary. Okay, and if you could focus really on
The new stuff.
the new stuff, that would be terrific. Thank you.
Okay, so the new stuff that wasn't mentioned for some of the greatest assets and strengths are our history, our charm and trees. I think maybe trees were mentioned, but nobody mentioned history. So history. All right. So what aspects of life in Teaneck need improvement? What would you like to see changed? Biggest challenges in the next 5 to 10 years? That wasn't mentioned. So we talked a lot about businesses and making sure that we're supporting our businesses, making sure that we, have opportunity for them to really grow and flourish. Was mentioned that low-rise apartments might be okay as long as proper setbacks are there. That wasn't mentioned. And we focused a lot about aging in place in Teaneck for our seniors and making sure that there's housing for Teaneck seniors to age in place. The empty nesters. Also making sure that the 4 quadrants of Teaneck are connected, whether that's through bridges, walking bridges, our infrastructure in place. Again, a lot of the stuff that was already mentioned. Key topics that the master plan should address. Crime was mentioned. We weren't sure what the current crime rate in comparison to the last master plan was. Zoning protection for multifamily houses in single family resident areas. Adherence to design, whether that's building material and height. Again, business climate and making it easier for businesses to improve. Transit-oriented design is something that we talked about, and also open space and parks that need upgrades, the rec department also. And then for who must be included, we talked also about parents with young children, maybe having afternoon or morning meetings as well. Business owners, also youth, whether it's high school children, FDU children, school age children, renters, young families specifically. So whether they're living in the apartments, how do we get them to stay and making sure that they're included and as stakeholders? People who work in Teaneck but don't necessarily live in Teaneck. And our police, fire, and DPW specifically was stressed as well. And then a lot of what everyone else said as well. So.
All right, thank you, group 2. And finally, group 1. All right.
Hasn't been said, and a lot has already been said. Okay,
Here you go.
Okay, so we talked about the greatest assets and strengths. Someone mentioned that Teaneck has good bones. That we have great sidewalks. It's a beautiful looking town. It's a well-kept town. It's very safe. Some other things were we have a respect and appreciation for arts and culture. We have good schools. And we have good public service, that we don't have shared services. The fact that we have our own fire department, police, et cetera. Asset also, of course, hospital and the university and hotels. Okay, next we talked about what would you like to see change, or what aspects of life in Teaneck needs improvement? We talked about our economic base, and we need to update our business districts. Of course, we talked about housing affordability was huge, diversity in housing stock, and that there is a need for middle income housing, that we have the, affordable housing. We have those that are able to afford market rate, but what about our young people and our seniors? That was a common theme. What would you like to see change? Develop the parks beyond Votee Park. Create walking paths for other parts, recreation not for the youth, not just for the young people and children, but for the aging. Improve senior services programs, mixed use housing on Main Street, that came up a lot. More fire stations, and alternate transportation in terms of shuttle buses to connect the 4 business districts. And someone even mentioned park and ride. A park and ride scenario, similar to what we have, like going into where all the buses would culminate and people could park their cars and go from there. Okay, now let me just mention some of the areas of concerns over the next 5 to 10 years. Social isolation was brought up. The concern of seniors and the disabled being socially isolated, and that came up in the slide where it talked about 30% of people being kind of like on their own. So that was a concern. What will the town physically look like in 5 to 10 years? Is it more suburban or is it more urban? Managing traffic, the cost of living, draining and flooding. So we talked a little bit about that. And also in terms of, just in general, how we can approach that. What's the one topic of the master plan that we must address? Drainage and flooding, maintaining the character, quality of life, establishing a design standard. Just want to cover what we haven't covered. Respect for private property rights, incentivizing commercial property owners to develop. That came up quite a bit. Looking at public private partnerships. Okay, and then lastly, who should be, who should be a part of the master plan development? Residents, business owners, and a cross section of the community, people from different neighborhoods, Northeast, and so forth. And the last thing was mentioned that until the master plan is completed, it was suggested that a moratorium on development and variances be considered.
Okay, thank